Yo, what's going on, guys? Mush back at it with another video, and in this video I want to take a look at 5 things you need to know about building a PC in 2018, a gaming PC obviously, as that is what this channel is centered around. I haven't done an informational and more advice style video like this in quite a bit, and I've been getting a lot of comments from you guys saying that you want more content like this, and I feel like right now is a very interesting time to build a PC since we know everything that's been going on with hardware, but as things begin to settle down, more and more of you guys are looking to build your PCs. I want to give you guys a little bit of advice going into building a PC in 2018 in the current climate. So without further ado, let's get right into this with my 5 tips. At number 1, let's just get the most obvious thing out of the way, and that is, yes, GPU prices continue to be very volatile. Now, I use the word volatile instead of just high or insane because they are volatile. That's what it is. They are changing all the time, and if you are crafty, if you are always looking for sales, you can get a somewhat decent deal on a GPU. I'm not saying it's like 14 months ago where you could pick up a 1070 for like under $350, but I've seen 1070s south of $400, and that's pretty good. And considering a GTX 1070 is still ridiculous when you talk about games coming out today, especially if you're playing at 1080p, a 1070 is just gonna crush anything you throw at it, unless it's one of those anomalies that do exist in the PC world. Even a 1060, you can get those for readily cheap. I've seen deals on RX 580s, but those come and go very quickly. Whenever like an 8GB RX 580 is posted for $250, I saw that the other day. A deal like that is only in stock for an hour or so. So what I'd recommend you to do, hit up reddit.com/buildapc sales, sign up for Newegg's newsletter, and what you could also do is I've started a little series on my channel called GPU Market Watch. I did the first episode a week and a half or so ago, and the second episode will be coming out later next week. That's a pretty good way to keep up with changing GPU prices. Thought I'd throw in that shameless self-promotion there. So check that series out if you do want to keep up with more GPU deals and what prices they are hovering around. Tip number 2, this parlays off tip number 1, and that is the fact that lower end GPUs might be the best option. Now, I've always said this when building a PC, this isn't anything different in 2018. It's actually kind of exemplified in 2018 because GPUs like a GTX 1050 Ti are readily available very cheap, and I actually noticed this in the comments. One guy I vividly remember bugging out in one of my videos comment sections recently saying how he was so upset that he bought a GTX 1070 and he could have gotten away with a GTX 1050 Ti and played all the games he wanted and saved a bunch of money, and that's why I always say make sure you buy a GPU that fits your needs. The GTX 1070 is probably the most promoted GPU on the market, that and the 1060, and I feel like for a lot of you guys, you think that's the GPU you need to get. Not necessarily. A 1050 Ti is actually very capable of running games at 1080p. Maybe not maxed out, but is it gonna end your world if you're not playing games maxed out? Honestly speaking, for a person like me with a PC with a GTX 1080 in it, I absolutely do not need a GTX 1080. Usually, I just prefer to play my games at 1080p. I did dabble with gaming at 4K. I usually can get by just playing games at 1080p. I would have been fine with a GTX 1060. Hey, even if I wanted to lowball it, I probably could have gotten away with a 1050 Ti. Yes, I wouldn't have gotten 60 FPS on every game maxed out, but if you're okay with playing games at medium or high settings, don't overkill your GPU. You just don't need to get one. Pick up something like a 1050 Ti for now, and then 2 years down the line, hopefully GPU prices will continue to stabilize and the value offerings will be even better. You can sell your 1050 Ti at that point or give it to a friend, and then you can pick up a GPU that's more value oriented at that given time. Going for that notion of, oh, I want to get a 1070 because I want to be future-proof for the next 4 or 5 years, that's just stupid because you could go year by year or even bi-yearly and just amass a better value. That's really the smart route to go if you are looking for the best value possible. I know a lot of you guys, you want to play games at the highest settings at 60 frames per second, and yes, if that is you, then by all means pick up a GTX 1070, pick up a 1060, but for a lot of you guys, I know you're okay with playing games at 1080p medium settings and getting 45 to 55 frames per second on the higher end titles. Well, then a 1050 Ti is going to suit you a lot better. And for a person like me, while yes, I do play the higher end games, these days 80% of my gaming time is going to stuff like Hearthstone, and no, I don't need a GTX 1080 to play Hearthstone, and even some of the higher end games these days, they don't require all too much from a GPU standpoint. A game like Ni no Kuni 2 that I've been playing a lot, that game isn't very hard to run. Of course, a game like Far Cry 5 will be a little bit more difficult, but at the end of the day, those games get really hard to run if you are maxing them out and looking and aiming for 60 frames per second. That's not going to be everybody's goal. So just make sure the GPU that you pick and the PC PC in general is in line with the goals that you're trying to attain. And moving on to number 3, it's almost a contradiction of number 2 where I was telling you guys to go for lower end hardware. Well, in this instance, I'm gonna tell you guys that 16 gigabytes of RAM is becoming more and more of a necessity. So if you are in that boat where you're looking to pick up a GTX 1070 and you're dead set on a GPU like that, also I would recommend you to be dead set on getting 16 gigabytes of RAM at this point, as 8 gigabytes, it's not going to completely ruin your experience, but it is going to hamper your experience if you're looking to max games out. And you look at upcoming titles and recently released titles, a game like State of Decay 2, that's recommending 16 gigabytes of RAM. Vampire is recommending 16 gigabytes of RAM. I believe Final Fantasy 15 recommended 16 gigabytes of RAM. This is going to be more and more of a commonplace, and at bare minimum you need to get 8 gigabytes of RAM. But if you have the money, I would highly recommend you to go with the 16 gigabyte route. Now if you're getting a PC with like a 1050 Ti and you're more budget oriented, then get 8 gigabytes of RAM. But at the same time, I think that notion of getting a 1070 or a 1060, the same adverse effect kind of holds true for RAM, where some gamers think they could still get by with 8 gigabytes of RAM. That was true for a long time, but at this point in 2018, depending on the gaming experience that you want, 16 gigabytes of RAM is becoming more and more of a necessity, and that's a shame because DDR4 16 gigabytes of RAM, that is going to absolutely destroy your wallet, which is unfortunate, but hey, them's the breaks. Waiting on RAM prices to get cheaper too, because that is making PC building a lot more difficult in 2018. Hopefully that adjusts itself soon too. Number 4, I talked RAM, I talked GPU. Well, of course you're gonna need a CPU, and I want to let you guys know that AMD CPUs in 2018 might be your best option. These CPUs are just absolutely ridiculous values, and what's great about AMD CPUs is at a budget range, they offer a lot of variety in price ranges. You could pick up solid Ryzen CPUs for $130, $180, and then if you want to go higher end, north of $300. But for a budget-centric build, getting a 4-core CPU for the neighborhood of $150, that's just really good. And the Ryzen CPUs have just been an absolute home run for AMD. I think they've done a great job with it. Unfortunately, with all of their GPUs being ridiculously expensive right now, kind of puts a damper in their entire market right now. But as far as CPUs go, I think they're doing a great job, and Ryzen is something that you should really take a look at. I know in terms of the CPU sector, Intel has gotten that high value sort of rub going on for it, and AMD's kind of been lower tier, or that's just been the perception in more casual eyes. That notion really needs to be dispelled, as for a budget, you can't get much better than the AMD Ryzen CPUs and what's offered at that price range. And number 5 is something that I've been touting for a very long time, and this kind of goes against the entire notion of building a PC, but I just want to get the point across that pre-built computers, even now, are still an incredible value. I covered a couple of pre-built deals yesterday, and the deals that you can get on these pre-built PCs are actually pretty ridiculous. I saw an AMD Ryzen 5 1400 with an RX 580 4GB for like $580. Again, as always with pre-built computers, you're getting a pre-installed copy of Windows 10. I know you can finagle your way and get a Windows 10 key for like $20, but really, how legitimate is that? You can do it, it's just that Windows is kind of a core element to a PC, and I really wouldn't finagle my way in getting a copy of Windows, but hey, everybody's gonna have their own preferences. But even still, the actual value that you get out of some of these PCs is absolutely ridiculous. Best Buy's got a PC right now, $850, a Ryzen 7 1700, an RX 580 8GB, which is ridiculously expensive right now, 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, which by the way, also ridiculously expensive, a 1TB hard drive. Unfortunately, that build didn't have an SSD, but still, $850 for all of that is so good that yes, while building a PC is becoming more and more feasible, buying a pre-built computer is still an incredible option, and deals are available readily for them. So if you are super eager to get a PC right now, look at the pre-built market. If there's something that interests you, maybe pick up that. If not, you can always build a PC, but just compare your options. Don't be closed-minded towards anything, maybe because you've heard a negative stigma attached to pre-built computers. I don't think that really exists. Usually you've got a pretty nice warranty on them as well, so if anything does go wrong, you can return them. But just be open-minded to every option available when you pick up a gaming PC, as that is, at the end of the day, one of the biggest benefits to PC gaming, is that the option is always in the player's hand, and pre-built computers still offer a great option and a great alternative if you don't want to build a PC. And especially at this point, it's just not a matter of fact of not wanting to build a PC. At this point, they are just the better value in a lot of instances, so just be open-minded to everything you come across. That is going to wrap up this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I think I offered some valuable information. Again, if you want to keep up with GPU prices, check out my GPU Market Watch series. I have one episode of that already up, and the second episode should be up later next week, so stay tuned for that. If you guys have a request for a future video, you can leave that in the comment section down below, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.